Good morning today. This is Ken Turner from Milford, Ohio, and we're going to talk about where is your brother and what have you done? We're talking about Cain and Abel. Story that's old. People use it for examples all the time. The conflict between Cain and Abel. And after he killed Abel, God asked a question. He asked two questions actually. He says, "Where is Abel, your brother?" And Cain responds, "I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper?" And then the Lord said to him, "What have you done? The voice of your brother's blood is crying to me from the ground." I don't know about you, but there's a couple of interesting things about this that I never thought about before. But one thing is that God asks questions here. Instead of just coming and saying and accusing Cain, he asks questions. He wanted, I believe, to see whether Cain was going to basically expose his sins, okay, or hide his sin. So he says, "Where is your brother?" "I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper?" "What have you done? Your brother's blood is crying out from the ground to me." Another thing that's interesting to me that I never thought of till just yesterday, actually, it came to me, is that here we are. We hear people talk about Cain and Abel and the struggle here and what happened here where Cain kills Abel. But does anybody ever mention that God's actually speaking to Cain here? God's actually speaking to Cain. So this to me, the way this plays out, it's like Cain was used to talking to the Lord. So that means Cain was used to being in the presence of the Lord. Just like Adam and Eve in the garden, when God came to them in the garden in the cool of the day, they were used to, they were comfortable with this. So this is interesting to me. I'm thinking that somebody that's used to having the presence of God right there and for God to speak to them audibly, that's powerful. But it also makes me wonder, and it makes me ponder, if they were in this type of situation with God, myself, it feels like that I would have more reverence, I would have more respect, I would be more honorable to God's voice and God's desire. But yet Cain didn't. He went to the extremes and actually killed his own brother. Adam and Eve committed the first sin, rebellion to God, because of a serpent, because of the enemy, because of Satan, of course. But still, they were in the very presence of God. They had conversations with God, evidently every day. It doesn't act like Cain's surprised that God shows up and asks him a question. I just like to, these are one of those aha moments, like, makes me think, and I like to make people think, ponder upon that. And in Genesis 4:3, we jump into this. In the course of time, Cain brought to the Lord an offering of the fruit of the ground. Now, I also find this interesting. He brought the offering to the Lord. And he was the first one that brought it. He brought it before Abel did. We're going to talk about Abel here in a second, but he brought it first. Now, it doesn't say it's the first fruit. It doesn't say it's the best. But Cain brought to the Lord an offering of the fruit of the ground. Now, that's interesting to me because I think God desires the first fruits. Actually, in the law, once the law was established, which this is before the law, it was required that they brought the first fruits. That means the first of the crops and the best. Okay? And it doesn't say anything about that. Now, is that because Cain became comfortable with his relationship with God, so he didn't worry about whether it was the first fruits or it was the best or not, but he just brought an offering to the Lord? Is that not what we do many times? Are we so comfortable with God and our relationship with God that we don't give him our best? Are we so comfortable with him that we don't give him the first fruits of the offering? And it says in verse 4, "And Abel also brought of the firstborn of his flock and of their fat portion." Now, the difference in Abel's offering, he also brought an offering to the Lord. He brought the firstborn of the flock, And he also brought the fat portion. The first fruits was what God required according to the law, and this was before the law, I know, but evidently because of the relationship they had with God, they must have knew this. Abel must have knew this for some reason. He brought the firstborn of his flock, in other words, the first fruits, and the fat portion. The fat portion was considered the best. Okay? It was considered the best of the best. So he brought the best. You know, it's God here is explaining to us the difference. I believe this is the difference in these two offers. Cain brought an offering to the Lord, and he brought it before Abel, evidently, and he brought fruit of the ground, which there was nothing wrong with bringing fruit of the ground, but he didn't. It doesn't say he brought the first fruits. It doesn't say he brought the fat portion or the best. And it says, and the Lord had regard for Abel and his offering. Why? I believe it was because he brought the first fruits and he brought the fat portion. He brought the best of the best to the Lord. Now, verse 5, but for Cain and his offering, he had no regard. God had no regard for. He turned away his gaze. He looked away. See, because the presence, it represents, when you look that up in the Hebrew here, the presence of the Lord, the presence is actually the face of the Lord, face to face of the Lord. It's a closeness. It's a recognition thing when we're in the presence of the Lord, that God recognizes us and we recognize him. Now, there's times that God recognizes us and we don't recognize him. But here, verse 5, it says, so Cain was very angry and his face fell. Now, he was upset that God did not have regard for his offering. But evidently, Cain didn't give the best. But you know, a lot of times we have conflict between brothers and sisters. We have conflict between people in the church. You know, a lot of times there's conflict there. And we can get jealous of others. People do it. People get jealous of others. Oh, how can God even bless that person? Look how that person's dressed, or look how that person acts, or I know that person and I know how they are. How can God touch them like he's touching them? And they may be crying. They may be shouting. They may be having this powerful experience in the altar and God is moving upon them. And yet people will get jealous of that. Like, why would God do that? How many times did it happen? Even in the story of the prodigal son, what happened? The older brother that was always there for his father and always in the house for his father, he got jealous of the younger brother when he came home and his father greeted him and accepted him back in. Father, you didn't make me a fatted calf. You didn't throw me a party. He said, son, you're always here. It's always available to you. Do you understand the power in that? It's always available to you. When we are a child of God, when we are a child of the King, his kingdom, his glory, God's resources are always available to us. His finances, the fruit of the vine of the Lord's house is always available to us. It even talks about in Scripture, we are the temple of God. And in him, he dwells in us. There's power in that. There's power when we're walking in that relationship. So many of us only look at our relationship with God as a free ticket to heaven. We don't look at the opportunity we have right here on earth, that God is with us and he's in us and he's here to bless us, that we may receive from him. But in turn, excuse me, we have to be obedient to him. In turn, we have to be righteous before him. We have to bring our best to him, to honor him. Hebrews 11:4, by faith, Abel offered to God a more acceptable sacrifice than Cain. Abel brought the more acceptable sacrifice than Cain. That's the reason why God looked away. He had no regard for Cain's offering. How many times do we not give God our best? How many times we don't give God our best? By faith, Abel offered to God a more acceptable sacrifice than Cain, through which he was commended as righteous, God commending him by accepting his gifts, and through his faith, though he died, he still speaks. In other words, this story goes on because of Abel, not because of what Cain did. Cain was rebellious. Cain fell into sin. This story still speaks to us today because of Abel's righteousness and because of Abel's offering, okay? His offering through which he was commended as righteous. God commended him as righteous because of his offering. God commending him by accepting his gift. And I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but I heard this recently from another preacher, and it's powerful. That God, when in the Old Testament, if you look, when they brought their offering before the Lord to the temple for their sins or for their sacrifice for their sins, God didn't look at them. God looked at the sin offering. The offering that was presented to him, he looked at it, whether it was holy, whether it was pure, whether it was first fruits, whether there was a fat portion to it. That's what God looked at. And today, the power of that is Jesus Christ is our sacrifice. He was pure and holy. And if we could learn to give God our best and come to the place that we realize that God has his table prepared before us, that it is available to us to receive the things from God. There is so much power in this. Hello again, this is Ken Turner from Milford, Ohio. Just a little short thing here at the end of this video. I feel like a little fish in a big sea of YouTube, and if you enjoy my videos, please just subscribe to my channel and give me a thumbs up. It really helps grow my channel, and I really just want to get the words out. I'm not trying to make a name for myself, but I want to get the word out. So if you like what you hear, subscribe to my channel and give me a thumbs up. God bless you.